Chapter 11 of I Survived the Bombing of Pearl Harbor, 1941. In an instant, a bomb exploded on the runway. A man disappeared in a blaze of flames and black smoke. Danny and Mac and both guards hit the ground hard. Mac came over and shielded Danny's head and shoulders with his body. He waited for a lull in the explosions, and then he scrambled to his feet. He grabbed Danny's hand, yanking him up. "We need to get out of here," he shouted to the guards. "We need to find cover." Turning to Danny, Mac yelled, "Come on!" Mac held Danny's hand tight as they ran. "Keep your head down." But where could they go? Bombs were exploding all around them. Boom! A truck exploded. Boom! 3 men fell to the ground. A plane flew in low. Pum, 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 pum. A spray of bullets ripped apart a car. Soldiers were crouched behind bushes and under cars. Some had small handguns and were firing uselessly into the sky. One soldier threw rocks. Danny couldn't believe it. Did they really think that would stop the planes? But he understood too. There was nothing they could do. Mac dragged Danny behind what was left of a huge airplane hangar. Through the enormous holes in the walls, Danny saw U.S. bomber planes, shattered and burning. In the lawn behind the hangars, bombs had blown craters into the grass. Mac pushed Danny into one and then jumped in after him. "Get down," Mac said. Danny curled up against the dirt wall, and Mac crouched next to him, shielding Danny with his body. Men shouted all around them. "He's hit! Watch out! We need help! They're coming in low!" Danny pressed his head against the side of the hole. Mac held him tight. "It will be over soon," Mac said. But the planes kept coming. Danny peered up, knowing he'd never forget the sight of those planes. They were small and gray, like killer birds. A whistling sound cut through the air, and then kaboom! Dirt, rocks, and metal rained down on them. Something sharp stabbed Danny in the calf. He reached around and pulled out a small piece of metal, tossing it behind him. Danny closed his eyes tight, praying for the attack to stop. Suddenly, he thought of Finn. He could almost feel that Finn was with him there, telling him to be brave. The feeling was so powerful. It filled Danny's entire body. And finally, the thundering stopped. The attack was over. The roar of the planes was replaced by the shouts of men. Danny turned and Mac fell back, his eyes dazed. "I'm hit," he rasped. "My back. I think it's bad." Danny looked at Mac's back. His stomach heaved as he saw a jagged wound, and more blood than he had ever seen. Mac wouldn't last long bleeding like this. A blonde soldier appeared above the crater. His glasses were cracked and he had a gash on his face. "Everyone all right here?" he asked. "He's bleeding bad, sir," Danny said. The soldier shouted for help, and within seconds he and another man were helping Danny lift Mac from the crater. Mac winced in pain as they pulled him onto the grass and laid him on his side. The soldier pressed against the wound with his bare hand, trying to slow the bleeding. "Hang on, sir," the blonde soldier said. "Help is on the way." But Danny didn't see any help. "Are there ambulances?" Mac asked. "All the ambulances are out, sir." Mac nodded grimly. His jaw was clenched and his face was very pale. "What about that car?" Danny asked, pointing to the red Studebaker parked next to the hangar. "That belongs to our colonel," the soldier said. Danny leaped up and rushed to the car. "Wait!" the soldier shouted, but Danny ignored him. The car had been spared any hits. It barely even had a scratch. Danny lifted the hood and studied the engine. He easily found the 2 ignition wires Earl had shown him. "You never know when you need to get somewhere quick," Earl said with a smile. As usual, Earl had been right. Danny carefully touched the wires together. The engine sputtered to life. Danny flung open the door and jumped inside. He drove the car around the holes and chunks of glass and metal, pulling up as close as possible to where Mac lay. The blonde soldier looked worried, but Mac managed to smile. "Good work, kid," he said. "I won't ask where you learned how to do that, but I'm darn glad you did." Danny and the soldier helped Mac into the car. "Go," the blonde soldier said. "The hospital is half a mile down on the right." "Wait," Mac said. "There are other guys who need help. We're not leaving until the car is full." 5 minutes later, there were 2 more wounded men in the car. One man had so much blood on his face that Danny couldn't tell what he looked like. The other was holding onto his leg like it might fall off. Danny drove as fast as he could to the hospital. The road was cratered and filled with burned wreckage. Once he had to get out and drag a huge piece of plane out of the road, but finally he made it. When they got to the hospital entrance, Danny blared the horn, signaling for help. While they waited for help, Danny turned and looked at Mac. Mac's eyes were fluttering. Danny wasn't sure what to do. And then he reached over and grabbed Mac's hand. "Mac," he said. "What?" Mac rasped. He could only think of one thing to say. I'll make my ma have dinner with you," Danny said, "when you get better." Danny saw a flicker of a smile across Mac's face. Outside the car, 2 orderlies rushed out with a stretcher. Behind them were 2 nurses. One of them was Ma. And that's the end of chapter 11.